enough with the warm-up. Time to catch us a real monster.
I did not expect to root for Guardians of the Galaxy this much. The game was weighed down by so many stagnant vibes during its pre-release cycle. The shadow of Marvel's Avengers, Square Enix's 2020 attempt to transmute the total media superiority of the Marvel Cinematic Universe into a living co-op video game, loomed particularly large. That game's cast of Hollywood facsimiles, all these fake Chris Hemsworths, left customers ice cold. And while the core narrative was solid, nobody enjoyed the meaningless currency grind.
Guys, I think we should hear our group for once.
I am Groot.
He says we should combine both ideas.
Guardians comes from the same publisher and appears to be made from the same stock. Except this time, it's a single-player only campaign, and the player is restricted to the least interesting member of the troupe, Star-Lord. There is a pervasive, focus-tested coldness that corrodes so many products that bear the Marvel name in 2021, and I wasn't optimistic that Eidos Montreal would be capable of overcoming that taint. That is, until I solved a puzzle involving a psychedelic space llama, who I needed to coax into chewing up some wires on the ship. The beast was either enchanted or repelled by each crew member's singing. He'd come closer to Star-Lord's melody or run away from Rocket Raccoon's, and so on. So we all took turns in belting out Bobby McFerrin's Don't Worry, Be Happy, until our mercurial llama was finally in place. Guardians is full of sequences that capture the odder, funnier, lighter side of Marvel's cosmic expanse. There's a full breaking left hook taken right out of the Arkham playbook, tying to an amazing twist that caught me hilariously off guard. Hell, deep into the game's final acts, I watched as the permanently chaffed Rocket Raccoon faced his one lingering trauma thanks to the encouragement and support of his teammates. The scene worked as a better emotional payoff than anything I've seen the character do on film.
Groot's the only real family I got, Will. He's the only one who's accepted me for me. You don't know what he's been through, the way he's been treated. Like some kind of thing to be studied and kept in a cage. He's not like you and me. He's not like anyone.
Guardians of the Galaxy has its heart in the right place. If only the game itself wasn't constantly sabotaging those efforts with exhausting technical jank. Like Avengers before it, Guardians of the Galaxy is steeped deep in the character action tradition.
I'll enjoy this!
Make your peace!
You wrest control of Star-Lord, as I mentioned earlier, and unload an endless stream of photon beams at the toothy beasties, corrupted interplanetary cops, and deranged cult leaders that stand in your way. A bar on the left side of the screen fills up as the player deals damage, punctuated by Marvelified versions of those vintage Devil May Cry descriptors. Marvelous. Uncanny. The remaining Guardians come into play with your unlockable special power Rolodex. I could ask Groot to bind my enemies to the floor with his roots, or summon up Drax for an earth-shattering ground pound. But outside of those instances, your fellow superheroes are relegated to the nameless faces that tend to populate Call of Duty levels, offering the faint image of warfighting solidarity without actually doing anything all that productive. It gets the job done. The combat isn't where Guardians of the Galaxy shines, but it is both flashy enough and simple enough to sustain some of the more active portions of the plot. Strangely, I found that the villain fighting got more engaging the closer I came to the game's conclusion. In the beginning, armed with only a pair of pea shooters and a handful of basic attacks, Guardians is a shooting gallery with no pulse.
Time for the big guns!
But when you're popping off multiple cooldowns at once and enjoying a fully optimized arsenal, the design gets closer to that overwhelming splash panel polychromatic eye candy that is so often prioritized in the films. Lasers, bombs, swords, and Drax flying in like a punishing Marvel vs. Capcom assist.
We must tell the dog about the priest.
Robot priest.
One of the best features in Guardians of the Galaxy is its huddle up function. Every once in a while, you can call the team together, offer some words of encouragement, and re-enter the fray with a damage buff, due to a pulpy 80s classic pulled from the game's trove of licensed material. It is genuinely incandescent. The story here is centered around the usual universe-threatening Marvel gamut. There is some sort of hyper-religious stellar church corrupting the minds of the Andromeda Galaxy. Our motley crew is here to stop them, even as the odds continue to pile up against them. The Guardians might be a roving batch of greedy malcontents, but at least they've got a heart of gold. All this is buttressed by Guardians' moral choice infrastructure, which is clearly ripped directly from the Telltale convention. Along the way, Star-Lord has a hand in shaping the team's plans and posture, which have a light impact on the narrative. In the interstitial periods between missions, you can chop it up with the team on the ship, akin to those elliptical therapy sessions hosted by Commander Shepard on the Normandy. The writers here are clearly bound to Marvel orthodoxy, but it was still cool to see some of their own flourishes. I should reiterate again that Guardians of the Galaxy is very much single player and plot focused. You move from chapter to chapter, disembarking on all sorts of famous Marvel locales, fighting through beautiful corridors that are occasionally broken up by some heavy duty cutscenes. That makes the game a bit of a dinosaur, in a good way. A number of the attack unlocks are tied to certain wrinkles in the dramatic arc, rather than meeting a certain threshold of resources. You will spend precisely 0 minutes staring at a talent tree a la Kratos from God of War. When I saw that the characters had their own suite of greyed out costumes, I thought for sure they were going to be cinched by some sort of depressing meta grind and an in-game real money store. Nope, you just find those stashed away in the remote corners of the geography as a reward for taking the time to explore. It brings to mind the storytelling conventions of the Uncharted and God of War series. Eidos doesn't punch at quite that weight, but it does enough here to be mentioned alongside their influences. That brings me to the core, debilitating issue with Guardians. The game is frequently, flagrantly broken.
Yeah, and Drax has a lot of really scary looking knives.
See? Nothing out of the ordinary.
At one point, I ran into 3 different crashes within a single hour of play. One was a bizarre softlock, the other 2 were straight up hardcore freezes that require an Alt F4 to escape. The first boss I fought was stuck in stasis as I blasted away at its tentacles, scoring oodles of cheap damage. The game routinely believed that Star-Lord had fallen down a phantom pit, and it dutifully teleported me back to some sort of crucible of danger completely haphazardly. It's bad, and Square Enix knows it. When I first downloaded my review code for Guardians, it came in at an insane 150 gigabytes. A few days later, the company issued a new version that reduced the file size and promised greater stability. The crashes I described earlier all occurred after that patch. Another patch is on the way, and more will surely come, but the odds that every crash will be swept away within days of launch are slim. The post-launch bug-fixing phase can last months and months with big games. This makes Guardians of the Galaxy a difficult game to recommend right now. Something clearly went awry during development because it's weird for a single-player linear game to have so many bizarre performance issues. This is something we expect in the high entropy of Tamriel, not the series of combat arenas and connective tissue that makes up Guardians. The closest analogue I can think of is Jedi Fallen Order, another Disney property that shipped with a well-hewn narrative, some neat combat tricks, and a boatload of sundering technical hang-ups. Unfortunately, I don't think Guardians is quite good enough to offset those problems the way Respawn did. Guardians of the Galaxy desperately wants to be a Technicolor, starfaring adventure worthy of the multimedia powerhouse that shares its namesake. It accomplishes that with its story, its voice cast, and its wonderfully cheeky 80s pastiche. If only the technical side could better keep up with those ambitions. For more on Guardians of the Galaxy, check out PCGamer.com.
In Soviet Russia, Cosmo would not trust words of capitalist scum. But this is not motherland, and Cosmo no power of collateral. Guardianship, stay on nowhere.